Hello, relatives. Amatakyapi. Ankapalo. I didn't know I was going to go live just like that. I thought there was going to be a little more to it. But nonetheless, here I am with you. I'm from the Ihonkawan people, the Yankton people, and I'm coming at you from South Dakota. We're going to go ahead and get started. There's going to be a little bit of a slight delay in my reading today just because I was clicking around on YouTube and found out that the live video started a lot faster than what I thought it did. But nonetheless, it's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful summer day. I want to say blessings to everybody. Anybody out there going through a hard time, people who are sick, people who are struggling. I want to just say hello to you and also make myself available to you. And I hope that this reading today is helpful. So I apologize for the delay. That was a bit of a surprise. What can I say? We'll go ahead and get started with the virtual smudge of virtual prayer. The act of just smudging is a prayer, by the way, just so you know, or it can be. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now I'm just going to go into this book, and I'm nothing fancy, relatives, nothing at all, nothing yet. I'm still trying to get my YouTube page up and going, trying to get as many followers and subscribers as I can, but it's slow going. I'm going to go ahead and go to this. It says, "Blessed are you." Now, I have no idea what it's going to say, so please give me a little bit of wiggle room here. And the only preparation that I've done is just what you've just saw. So that's part of doing these readings, and that's part of just sort of embracing the concept of just going with the flow, with exposing myself to you in a way that lacks preparation, but nonetheless, I am a spiritual being. I am a human being, and just trusting that. Okay, so here's the reading today. Blessed are you. The meditations of my heart are the words I write each morning, guided by unseen currents in the stillness of prayer, scribbling quietly before the dawn, to catch the meaning, waiting at the far edge of every night. I do not know how well these words will serve the purpose to which they are painted, but truth is never tame and justice never content. So I write what my heart reveals. Blessed are you who believe without judgment, who love without condition, who act without reward, who give without prompting, who pray without ceasing, who keep on dancing when there is no music. Okay, good one. Now we're going to go to the Elders Meditation for today for July 8th, and we'll see what that says as well. And then we'll just have a quick talk about it. So we are connected to the moon. That gives us power, a connection to the earth and the moon men don't know about. The elders tell us that the woman has access to special powers. The earth mother gives her love in a special way to the woman. The moon also gives special powers to the woman. Men should respect powers of the woman. She uses these powers to nurture, heal, and guide the people. Then there's a brief prayer at the bottom, and then it says, "Great Spirit, today give me a special blessing to a woman." Give a special blessing to our woman. Yes, absolutely. Wonderful. Beautiful, beautiful reading. I think that these readings were at a time when a lot of women were being abused, a lot of women were being victimized and obviously portrayed as mostly sexual in the kitchen, um, stay in your place type of thinking. And we now know that there's more to a woman, and there's more to us, there's more to people than what we've been informed. In essence, we've been misinformed for a lot of years, whether it be in your own household or whether it be nationally or worldview. And so I think the evolution of a woman's role in bringing in new information go hand in hand. Obviously, with that new information, we have to make room for that, and so it's a really sacred time when we are doing that, when we are allowing ourselves to assess and evaluate the teachings that we have received and their impact on how we view ourselves and how we view the world and how the world views us and how all of creation views us. And so if we're walking around, and granted, relatives guilty as charged, I was brought up in such a way that was a very dangerous place, a very dangerous outlook upon life, a very dangerous, a very short viewed perspective on how I saw myself. I was brought into the world and grew up in a very limited capacity that said that was very judgmental, and it taught me how to be judgmental towards myself. It taught me how to be judgmental towards people. Thus, it really cut me off and limited my perspective on what life was, what it meant to be alive. And that was very, very damaging, and created a very limited and small view. And thus, I was involved in small conversations, limited friendships, small friendships. And though that got me through, and it served its purpose, and no doubt that there was value within those friendships and within those relationships, myself with inside of me, I knew that there was much more to this world, much more to this life, and much more to me than what I had been taught. And so at a very young age, I did my best to reject that limited, boxed in. It was meant to box you in so that you could conform to the rules and mandates of that community, of that family. And thus it worked. It really boxed me in. It really made me feel like you belong over here, and that is your role. And our role is going to be one where we're going to tell you what your role is. And so I did my best to conform, but it was never good enough. It was absolutely never good enough. And things have changed, but yet much of that is the same. Deep down inside each and every single one of us, deep within us, some people say we carry our spirits. I believe our spirits carry us. And so when we connect to, we start to restructure, assess, and evaluate our lives and our thinking. We then start to work in harmony with creation, which is always assessing and moving and never stops and is always in motion. And so that's why many of us, such as myself, felt like I had been stuck. I had been placed. I was like on a checkerboard or a chessboard. And in the game of chess of life, I was put in a square, and I was basically at the mercy of society, who would dictate and tell me where I was going, what role I was playing, and what I needed to do to sustain my role for the um, approval of others. And that certainly lacked any type of spirituality or any type of it was really a limited view, because back then they viewed, much like they viewed women as very limited, they viewed Native Americans as very limited, and it just got to the point where it worked. I tried to protect myself. I knew, in a sense, as a child, just in a very limited sense, what was happening. And so that's why I really tried to escape that. But of course, I can't. You have to rely on adults, and you have to rely on the system, right? You have to stay alive. You have to eat. You have to. And so I ran away a lot. I was a daydreamer. And in that sense, I resisted, and I went to a place within to create a world, an imaginary world, but that was from that sacred place within us. And so for myself, when I'll go back to the reading, when I viewed women, um, I was going by the mandates and by the perception of what, wherever it was that I was at. And of course, as a young growing boy, I didn't know anything about I didn't receive any sort of spiritual teachings relative. So my journey has been one of disrespect towards women, one of being fearful of women, one of being like putting them on a pedestal. And that is entirely different from honoring women. That is entirely different from seeing women as gifts. So I was really afraid of women for a very long time. Thankfully, that has changed. Thankfully, that's no longer the case, and I'm really grateful for that. Um, but that just goes to show you that wherever we're at in how we were brought up really does have an impact, even a lifelong impact on how we see others, and that is directly connected in how we see ourselves. And so now that I have this respect, and this healthy respect for other people, including women, I have that is direct correlation and has brought me closer to the values and it has taken me into the cyclical, as opposed to that boxed in mentality where the perception is I need to stay in my place. And if your spirit is telling you this isn't your place, there's going to be a constant push and pull. There's going to be, and your energy is going to be like in a hamster wheel. You know what I mean? Or let's just say in that box. My perception and belief about other people was limited. Thus, my belief in myself became very limited. It's just like that example in that experiment that actually happened about fleas, where they would place fleas in a jar with the lid on, and the fleas would try to escape. Fleas can jump super high, and they can certainly jump a lot higher than the distance from the bottom of the jar to the top of the jar. But the problem is that they were hitting their head and they were hurting themselves. And so then they limited their jumping to just within the jar where they wouldn't hit their head on the ceiling. And one of the weird things about it, and one of the things about that to sort of help with what I'm talking about, is they had become habituated to believe that they could only jump so far. They had lost the connection to themselves. And so, as the experiment went on, the scientists then removed the lid. And so, thus, removed the barrier. But the interesting thing about that, and in other words, the fleas then had the ability to jump entirely out of that jar. However, they had been impacted by hitting their heads, by being hurt by that containment that they then had been habituated and socialized with each other to believe that they could only jump that high, the distance from the bottom of the jar to the top of the jar, but without hitting their heads, even when the jar wasn't there no more. And so they stayed within the jar, and you could see them. You could see them jumping like fleas jump. That's what they do, is they jump. They have this ability to jump just comparative to their size. They're like Superman, you know what I mean? But because they had been conditioned, they stayed within that jar, and they stayed thus, even though they knew, thus they were prisoner. They were boxed in. They were contained, and they could have easily jumped out of the jar. And the even more interesting about that is their offspring, who had never experienced hitting their head on the top of the jar or having a jar lid to contain them, had never had that experience. Their offspring, their children, also jumped only so high. So they had been conditioned as well, even though they didn't live in a time of the lid times. They inherited and were instructed by their parents, their flea parents, and that had been passed on. So that was intergenerational with fleas. And they themselves, even as children, even as babies, could have easily jumped out of that jar. So it does make one think about oneself when you think about that, as how is our beliefs, where we were as youngsters and even in today in society, affecting us. It is good to assess that, relatives. It is healthy to assess that. But it's really healthy to also understand, for myself, the impact of where these beliefs come from, to do some real soul searching for within myself, because within myself are my ancestors. Within myself are my relatives. And so for myself, since I was brought up in such a violent way, in such a neglecting way, I needed to do some assessment and evaluating and some homework on why it is my parents passed on those beliefs to me. Thus, when I started to heal, my ancestors were healing. So when I started to jump out of the jar, escape from that box mentality, I started to heal. I started to use my legs. I started to use my wings, the way that my ancestors prior to being boxed in and jarred in that lid mentality. So thus since they are a part of me, they experience the healing. They experience the change. They experience the usage of their nature-given, God-given, creator-given abilities. And so thus, outside of the jar mentality entered into my life, outside of the box mentality entered into my life. But it was very important for me to also understand the impact of being boxed in. What did that do to me? And that took a lot of soul searching, because that took a lot of assessing myself, my character, my beliefs, my actions, my patterns. And that was at that time, that was very, very difficult, because I had been a bad boy for a very long time. I had done so many things. And again, if you don't know me, I will tell you, I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. And of course, if you live that way, you've created a lot of problems, and you've been through a lot, and you've also put people through a lot. So that was something that I couldn't have done if I was in the job. That was something that I couldn't have escaped from the jar unless I would have done that. So I believe that is necessary when we look at ourselves. People say get over the past, but I'll tell you what, if there are patterns in your life, if that for myself, if there is something that is going on within you that is typically directly related to the past, and that is that opportunity, that teachable time, that beautiful time to learn about ourselves, to learn, and thus we learn about, and we learn about our ancestors, we learn about our people, we learn about ourselves, and thus those teachings become why. Thus, we know, we learn more about, if I'm a flea, I'm learning more about why it is that we do have that ability to adapt, but why it is that we did adapt, why it is, and thus for myself, in resenting my parents because of the way that I was brought up, that resentment would have cycled into the next generation, and then that would have cycled into the next generation. And so now I'm healing because I'm doing that homework about what happened. And so that resentment now is learned in new information, right? New information is entering my life, and I'm letting go of old information, and I'm bringing in new experiences. That resentment is being replaced and reshaped into a learning experience. It's not something that I want to throw away and just not talk about. It's something that I want to look at, and I want to help it shape my understanding about what happened to our family, why it happened. Thus, and I'm learning more about how strong my ancestors were, how they resisted, what they did. I'm learning more and more and more, and that's shaping and molding me. And that resentment turns into forgiveness, compassion, and that is intergenerational, just like the flea mentality was intergeneration. And now there's a whole new generation of fleas, and that jar serves as an example if I'm a flea grandfather and I'm looking and I'm showing the evolution of how our people have changed, I will want to use that jar. I want to have that jar, and I want to say, grandson, look at one time. This is where we were. Prior to that, we were different. And then one time somebody came along and jarred us in, boxed us in, and that affected us. We lost, or we thought we had lost our ability. We thought we had lost our ability to jump. We thought we had lost our ability to be who our ancestors were. We thought, and thus our thinking had changed. And so we went through a great changing time where when that jar was lifted, we saw that there was great change coming for our people. And so now, relatives, we ourselves have that ability to unscrew that lid, take that lid off, throw it away, or whatever it is you want to do it. Jump out of that glass, jump out of that box. Put that lid back in so nobody gets stuck in there. Make sure everybody's out of there. And then set it over here and use it as an example of how we grow and how we've evolved, how we continue to grow, how we will continue to evolve, how we might get ourselves boxed in by places, by mentalities, and how that we are constantly going to be in a state of conflict, clarity. It's a cycle. So with that, I thought that was a good reading. I really like that. I hope you did too. I'm going to go ahead and end today's reading. I'm just going to encourage you to please like and share. Please support my station by subscribing and then asking others to subscribe. And I'll continue to do these. I'm just going to let you know right offhand that things are definitely changing in our Tioshpae, in our family, in our Tiwahe. Our Tiwahe, our Tioshpae is going through a very difficult time because one of our loved ones is going through a very, very extreme, difficult time. And so I'm spending a lot of my energy being there for him. Someone very close to me, someone that I love. Man, I'll tell you what, that I love as much as I loved anybody in my entire life. And so I know that it's impacting in a good way, impacting my videos. So it just goes to show you, that each day is precious. Life is precious. You are precious. You are a gift. You have life. You are a soul. You are a spirit. And please, if you feel like you're being boxed in, if you feel like somebody's jarred you in or you inherited that mentality, I encourage you to assess that. Start writing it down. Start talking to somebody. Start putting yourself in talking circles. Reach out to me. My number is 605-491-0200. Okay, 605-491-0200. My email is also on this page somewhere. And I absolutely would encourage you to reach out to me as well. So with that, I will say goodbye, Doksha. Okay, thank you for being who you are today. The struggles are real, without a doubt, but I want you to know that you're not alone, relatives. And if you feel alone, please reach out. There are lots of resources out there, and I am one of them. That's why I put my phone number, my contact information out there, and I hope to hear from you.